Today's episode of the Awaken podcast is a juicy one. We're going to be talking about dealing with the haters and the naysayers. How do we handle when people are judgmental and don't understand what we're doing in our lives? This is a necessary rite of passage for every one of us who are going out into the world to play big. And we want to share with you how you can navigate it with grace. Take the high road and keep going. Don't let the haters distract you or bring you down. This is what this conversation is going to be all about. It's going to be fun, and you're going to leave empowered with practical tools to stay focused and play a big game in your life. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Awaken podcast,
where we share practical spirituality for modern living.
Join us as we dive deep into conversations about healing and transformation.
Let's go. Here we are. Cheers.
Welcome, everyone.
We've got our cacao.
We do.
We're ready to set our intentions.
I'm excited for this one.
If you're with us, you can close down your eyes and take a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. I know that a lot of people struggle with this, so my intention is to support people in breaking free and liberating themselves from other people's judgments and just going out there and doing whatever it is they want to do, just getting on with it and feeling empowered in it.
I'm feeling that too. The word that I chose before we actually began recording is freedom.
Liberation.
And like you, I know that feeling where you just don't feel free, and how heavy and constricted and scary life can be when judgments have a hold on you. So freedom all the way, baby. Let's call
go.
it in. Let's give you some tools and help all of you listening to break free.
We've been mentoring coaches in the field now for years. And one of the things that I see over and over again with people who are putting themselves out on social media is the fear to take up space and to speak their truth, to authentically be themselves, because they're afraid of what other people will think of them, and they're afraid of other people's judgments and projections. And a lot of people deal with this, and it actually slows them down and stops them from being in their power and being authentic. So let's unpack this, let's dive in, and let's give some practical strategies and stories at our experience with this, because we got a lot of experience with the haters.
Yeah, and there is a way to navigate judgment and hate that isn't adding more fuel to the fire and combating hate with hate and judgment with judgment, which I think is a lot of people's strategy. They become defensive and have those walls up, and it's like we all want someone to blame when we're in the ego, and there is another way. And I think that this conversation ultimately is about learning how to rise above it. Truly, there is a way to vibrate higher and live your life in a trauma-informed and compassionate way where you can recognize what's actually going on rather than getting caught up in the surface level drama, which is usually what hate and judgment and projections are throwing our way. And if we're a ninja, if we're aware and in control of our own emotions and aware enough also to get beyond ourselves and to recognize the deeper motivations behind why people do what they do, like understanding a bit of the psychology behind it, I think we realize then and there that we don't need to take it so personally. And we do have the choice to be free.
Yeah, not everything deserves a reaction. But let's take it back to when we first started putting ourselves out on social media. And of course, the hate came. Let's give the listeners an insight into how we first dealt with that. Because I know for me, when hate was coming my way, when we first started putting ourselves out there, I used to react to it. I used to be bothered by it. It did used to weigh me down. I was affected negatively by it.
Yeah, well, I think for me personally, this goes back way further than career self-expression ventures that we've been on. And for me, what I remember is that I've always felt weird and like the odd one out. And I think I've come to understand that as human beings, we all have a primal drive to want to belong, because belonging is equated with feeling safe and secure, right? We're not solo lone wolf creatures that operate on our own, or at least I don't think we're meant to when we're thriving. I think that ideally we want to feel safe to be in connection with others. And when we feel like the odd one out, or when we start to go against the grain or think differently, there is a primal threat that many of us will naturally register, that we are going to be outcasted. We're not going to belong. Our place in the pack is changing. It's being threatened. It's going to be taken away. And whether it's that we're stepping away ourselves and choosing that, or we're being like rejected by the pack itself, by our friends, our family, our peers, whatever it may be, that can feel scary in a way that I don't think many people fully understand in the moment when it's happening. Like they don't understand why they're having such a reaction to it, or why they feel so afraid or resistant to the experience of being outcasted. But it's because this goes way beyond our conscious selves. This is much more primal than that. It's connected to our sense of survival.
Yeah.
So that came up for me. It comes up for everyone. And I feel like that was more and more present when I was in school, where I, even down to things like what I would wear. I remember wearing things and being like, my other friends don't wear the types of clothes that my parents would dress me in, or that I personally wanted to wear. And there's this hierarchy thing that can start to happen, right? Where we're like, okay, if I'm shining, if I'm considered cool or inspirational or whatever it may be, then I get treated one way. Or if I'm not cool and I'm unpopular, or the way I'm being is not favorable, then I also get treated differently. And I think for a lot of people, and this is including me, the safe zone that I fell into unconsciously was like the vanilla gray zone of the middle, of being like, well, if I don't take up too much space and I don't make myself stand out too much, then I'm going to blend in and I won't rock the boat too much, and I'll feel more safe. And then I'll experience less judgment and less risk of rejection. So
I totally
can
get
start
that
there.
choice. Yeah.
That's where it began for me.
Yeah. That choice is coming from fear though.
100%.
And when we're in that state of survival, when we're trying to preserve energy and our identity feels threatened, then we might make those choices from fear to not take up space, to not shine, to become vanilla and to dim ourselves down. But ultimately, that's not authentic to ourselves and who we came to be. I know for me, I consciously chose not to do that. When I was a teenager, I always felt outcasted. I felt different. I felt misunderstood. I didn't fit in. I was always the outsider looking in. I knew that I was different, so I accepted it. And that came with its own struggle and its own pain. But I made the conscious choice to be different, to do whatever I wanted to do. I wasn't there to listen to the teachers and people who were telling me what I should do. That just didn't resonate with me. I wasn't feeling like it was my truth. It was their projection on what I should do in my life. And I never resonated with it. I always knew my own truth. And people didn't like it. People didn't like that I had a different way of thinking, that I would ask questions that went against the grain or brought up things that they didn't know how to answer or made them feel uncomfortable. I remember even early in school, the teachers not liking me pushing boundaries, not liking me questioning the rules. They really disliked it. And I think for me, I started to notice that even though the teachers were older than me and they were in this position of authority, I could see through them. And I didn't believe what they were saying. It didn't resonate. It didn't feel like my truth. And I could feel that from an early age. And I think that made them really uncomfortable.
Yeah, so what I find interesting that I want to unpack more is what got you through that and allowed you to defend your own authenticity. One of our mentors and teachers, Gabor Mate, talks about the choice that children go through to remain connected or to remain authentic. And ideally, what we want in a secure attachment style relationship with our families and with our peers is to be able to remain both authentic and connected at the same time. But that's not available for everyone. So we have that choice, that difficult decision to make as young people. Am I going to stay true to myself and experience disconnection, but stay true to me? Or am I going to abandon my authenticity and modify how I express myself and how I show up in order to remain connected? And so while we've both experienced both phenomena in different situations, what I was describing was a choice to abandon my authenticity and become more of a chameleon to remain connected. Whereas what I'm hearing from you is that you chose to disconnect to protect your authenticity.
I chose to rebel. And I think that's something that is just a part of my spirit. I'm naturally rebellious, and I feel like I came here to be a disruptor. And I feel like you did too. And I feel like that's what we do with Awaken. We're bringing personal development, transformation, and healing to people in a way that it's never been done before. And we're so real. We're not wearing any hat that isn't authentic to ourselves. We're just being fully ourselves. And we're bringing in these tools in a way that people can relate to it and they can have a direct experience of transformation and healing. And I believe that's what we came here to do. We came here to shake things up. We came here to question things. We came here not to play by the rules. We came here to disrupt the whole game. And I really feel that passionately because we are living in a game.
Yeah.
And many people just go along with it and they don't question it. And that includes holding themselves back because of fear of judgment and rejection from others, including the people closest to you. Because, like you said, people want to remain connected. So they then sacrifice themselves and their own authenticity just to fit in.
Yeah. And I think that this is a rabbit hole that we could explore more over many episodes. But essentially, what I know to be true is that within our journey of surviving, there is also this inner primal urge to survive and also to evolve. And what we see time and time again with people is that that survival adaptation response can manifest as either matching and mirroring the environment or rebelling against it. And so in this case, you chose to rebel. And there's so many ways that I did the same, where there were things in my upbringing that I don't know where I got it from. I don't think anyone ever told me that it wasn't meant to be that way, but there was something in me that just said, this is not how it's meant to be for me. And I don't have a role model. I don't have an example of something different. I don't have anyone to guide me in this, but I know in my soul that I'm meant to do this differently, and I'm never going to be like that, and I'm not going to turn out like this person or this person. So I've got to find another way. And that adaptive intelligence kicks in and goes, it's time to get creative and evolve and find a new probability to create in your life. So I love that you describe that, because we all have that option available, right? Your past and your family and your peers and where you came from and what they've done does not define what's possible for you or where you're going.
Yeah. And in the last podcast, we spoke about becoming unreasonable in the pursuit of your dreams. One of the things I shared is it's important that we don't take on board other people's projections, limitations, and judgments because they're coming from their own internal programming. And your vision was gifted to you by life, the universe, God, and you can't expect other people to understand the vision for your life and what you came here to do because it's not theirs. So how would they even try to get it or understand what you're here to do when they can't see it, feel it, know it, or connect to it? It was gifted to you. So it's important to not take advice from people who are not qualified to give you the advice. Meaning, if there's something that you want to do and you're listening to people that haven't been on that path, they haven't achieved it, they haven't made it their reality, they're not qualified to give you advice because they haven't lived it. You might not have direct access to people who have accomplished things that you want to accomplish, but there is definitely a blueprint out there, whether that's a book, whether that's a YouTube channel, whether that's a podcast. There is examples of people that have done what you want to do, and you get to take that blueprint and then do it in your own way that it's authentic to you. But you can't be listening to people that have not done it. And not only that, that are not taking risks, that are not investing in themselves, in their own dreams, and they're just sitting on the sidelines, tearing others down or placing their own projection and judgment on your vision and what you want to do. And sometimes that comes from a place of wanting to protect you. Like, for example, sometimes family members who genuinely love you and care for you might tell you that you shouldn't do something because they believe they're trying to keep you safe from failure or from making a mistake. But sometimes that's coming from their own limitations, and you have to question that for yourself. Does it sit true with you? Does it resonate? Does it feel like your truth? And I think that's where people get a little bit lost, where they're listening to people that aren't qualified to give them the right advice.
Yeah, this is so key, everyone, because so many people who mean well do have opinions that aren't ultimately helpful. This is also going to come into asking for advice in even the little things. I know as a female, women love to talk things through. And when I was early in my journey of figuring out what I wanted to do with my career, when we were early on in our relationship, when I was making really new, bold choices about what direction I wanted to go in my life, even with things like choosing to go traveling, I would go to my girlfriends and we'd have lunch, we'd catch up. And the habit was to talk about everything that was going on, like, go over the latest updates. And when you're giving your power away to people, when you're not really sure of your own direction and needs and desires, it's very autopilot to be like, what do you think? Should I? Do you think this is a good idea? What do you think about that? And we don't realize that we're opening ourselves up to potentially receive unhelpful advice and misguided information, uninformed suggestions, and
So
it's
true.
really not helpful.
Yeah.
So this includes truly with your relationships. Like for us, I've learned that I need to be really careful about who I open up to receive any form of advice from about relationship situations, because to be honest, like you said, don't take advice from people who aren't doing well in the area that you're wanting to succeed in. A lot of people
Major key.
have very unhealthy relationships. And I find that a lot of the time people unknowingly give really bad relationship advice that opens up dynamics that are based in ego, defense, taking sides. Like when things get difficult and we get unsure and shaky, which every human being has phases where things get challenging, you got to be so careful, because I have seen this play out with friends, with family, with clients, and so on, where, for example, in relationships, if things get rocky, someone can be like, just break up. They're not good for you. They're not right for you. I wouldn't be doing that. Say no to that. And it's like, there's so much nuance. And if you were to go and seek out, say, a qualified therapist or someone that's been with their partner in a marriage for 50 years, they're going to give completely different advice or guidance.
Do you know,
So that's one example.
in 18 years of our entire relationship, I've never once asked for relationship advice. Never once. And I'm just reflecting on that now when you're speaking about it, because I knew that no one could give me advice. Like,
Right.
how
They're
could
not in
they?
the relationship.
No, and they don't know my truth, and they don't know your truth, and they don't know our hearts and our soul contract and what we're here to do. They're not qualified.
Exactly. So that's one example where I see it play out all the time. People innocently, but very unconsciously open themselves up to unhelpful input.
Yeah.
Another example of this that I can remember, which was earlier on in our journey, was I decided that I didn't want to be a fashion stylist anymore. And I was like, okay, I'm feeling called to go and study hypnotherapy. And I remember this family dinner that we had, and the news was so fresh. And I was like, okay, I'm going to study hypnotherapy. And my family did not get it. Like, I love my family, it's all good. I understand that at the time it would have sounded quite weird.
Yeah.
But I remember being quite sad, and I felt deflated and was like, they don't understand
Well,
me.
you were excited about it, like genuinely passionate about it, and they kind of shut it down.
And if you are a little insecure or vulnerable in your position,
Or if you're excited about something.
yeah, like excited, but again, also if you're vulnerable to being like knocked off your buzz or having your bubble burst, I think it's so important to hold those things a little more sacred and close to you.
Especially if it's not a safe space. So if you have people
Yes.
around you that aren't going to get it, then it's probably wise to not share it with them. Again,
Yeah.
it's not their vision. They can't see it.
Because what it brought up for me at the time was a feeling of shame and self-consciousness. And it's like, if you imagine a kid, and I've actually had this happen too, if you're like an innocent kid and you're like, I'm going to sing and dance, and you're in your full innocent, like pure, direct self-expression. And then instead of it going really well and everyone being like clapping and being like, go you, you're amazing, they start laughing at you and pointing the finger at you, and they're like, you're a loser.
Yeah, well, that's how haters operate. They're vampiric. And they do that because ultimately they don't feel secure, they don't feel happy, they don't feel good about their own lives.
Or they're not, even like a little less than that, they're lacking awareness of how their actions impact other people, and they're lacking empathy.
Yeah, but even if it's unconsciously, they're seeking to tear other people down because it's a fuel source. It's how they get energy, and it's how they feel better about themselves, because some part of them doesn't feel good, that doesn't feel, happy about their life and what they're creating. And they're not in the driver's seat. They're not taking responsibility for their own life. And it's so easy to sit on the sidelines and point the finger and tear other people down through judgment, through projection, through finding flaws, which is a big thing, on social media. People are so quick to point the finger and pull others down as a source of energy. Now, this is a lower vibrational way of operating in the world. It is vampiric, but so many people do it, whether it's unconscious or they're consciously doing it, like getting out, writing a message on the keyboard and just sending it off, spreading hate. And one of the things I've seen over and over again, and we receive our own amount of hate, but we work with, some people that are genuinely famous and receive thousands and thousands and thousands of messages of hate when they put themselves out there and do big things. And what I've noticed with these people who are just straight up haters, one, you can never win.
You can never win.
Because their ego will defend their position. So there's no point even trying to have a comeback or present your position. It's literally a waste of time.
Well,
and you're feeding into a game that is just giving them energy. And ultimately that vampiric energy and way of being wants to play that game. It wants to feed off that energy.
Yeah, let's just rephrase that actually. So, okay, you can win, But you can't win if you play the low vibrational game
Totally.
with them.
Yeah.
You have to rise above it. That's the only way to win.
That's the key. You have to rise above it, which means first and foremost, knowing that not everything deserves a reaction. So not giving your attention and your energy to their negative comments. We all know what it feels like to be on the receiving end of a negative comment. It doesn't feel good, but it does feel like it throws you off for a minute. But you have to look at it and see, where is that coming from? And is that true? Like, one of the things that many people talk about is it can only really stick to you and trigger you if on some level you believe it to be true. So that's important to look at it. If you are getting triggered around negative comments, maybe there's a part of you that believes that to be true.
Okay, so let's give an example here. Let's say if I said to you, you're a really bad piano player. Like, that's so embarrassing. You're a really bad piano player. You would have no reaction to that, right? Because you're like, okay, cool.
No charge.
Don't care.
I'm not great at playing the piano.
Not trying to be.
Not trying to be. So
Zero impact.
zero impact.
Whereas if I was to say something that was close to a vulnerability, a wound, something that you're unsure of or insecure about, there's a stickiness.
Yeah.
And like a hole or a Velcro stick that's waiting to happen, where that can initiate or trigger a reaction.
It hurts. Or
Right.
it feels like there's a part of us that wants to defend our position. Like, no, that's not true. And I'm going to tell you why it's not true, but that's a waste of energy.
So what this then points to is an invitation to really get to work on knowing yourself and loving yourself as you are, imperfections and all, and dropping the need to defend or overcompensate. And really getting to a place where you're in self-acceptance.
Yeah.
Because when you're in self-acceptance and self-love and security, like, you don't need to be perfect to be secure, and you don't have anything to prove. One of my favorite quotes from A Course in Miracles is, "In my defenselessness, my safety lies." And I know the power of being like, okay, I have nothing to defend right now.
So I feel like I'm there now, but that wasn't always the case. But I remember when we first started putting ourselves out on Instagram, I did react to the negative comments. Like, I would reply back to these haters, and I remember it would drain my energy, and I'd think about it afterwards. Like, it would follow into the rest of my day, and I'd feel negative within myself, and my mind would be going over it and over it, and I couldn't just drop it. And that's not a good place to be, where you're allowing other people to have power over you, because that's what's happening. If you're reacting to negative comments, then those people have power over you, and they're taking up mental real estate, and you're allowing them to take your energy. And that's something to look at, because when you're in your power, like you said, and you feel liberated within yourself, which is where I feel now. So when I get negative comments, which happens, I'd say, on a weekly basis, I just delete.
Yeah, block, delete, ignore.
Delete. I just don't care. I'm not even going to engage. Literally, I know that you're unhappy in your life. You're projecting your own limitations, fears, negativity, and judgments onto me. It's super low vibrational, and I have no time for people like that in my life. You're not taking up any of my time. See you later. Like,
So
goodbye.
True. Yeah. It's so uninspiring.
It's so uninspiring. It's
And when
so low level.
And I think when you value your own time and energy and space enough, and you're secure in what you bring to the world, you really get that. You're like, not inspired, delete,
See ya.
Ignore, really a waste of my attention right now. Get out of the way.
Yeah.
And I think that there is space for that. I mean, some people listening might even be a little triggered by that. Like, that's not very love and light to just delete and ignore, or say that someone is like a waste of your attention. But not everyone is ready for growth. And I think if they're not participating in their own growth in a proactive way, then let them step aside and figure that out, and keep moving.
Yeah, and my social media platforms are not a dumping ground for negativity and other people's judgments and projections and hate. I don't allow that into my space. I'm there to lift people up. I'm there to inspire, to motivate, and to be a force of good in this world. So when negativity comes my way, see ya, I'm not taking it on board, and I'm also not allowing it and inviting it into my life. People are entitled to their own opinions, but if it's coming from a negative place within yourself, then maybe just keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
If it's not growth orientated, if it's not bringing anything good, like I'm all about constructive criticism and becoming better and learning and growing. But when it's coming from straight hate, no, thank you. Not wanting to engage with that,
Yeah.
not interested.
So a few little lessons that I think we can take away from this part, and there's so much more that I'm excited to talk about on this. One is to recognize that not everything deserves a reaction. The second part of this is to recognize that if you are to engage in these low vibrational conversations or energy exchanges, you're getting sucked into something that is going to bring you down.
Yeah.
And I know that feeling, and I really want to emphasize this. Every single time I have responded to a hater, it messes up my day.
It wastes your time.
It wastes my time. And I know this feeling, okay? So like, let's say someone comments on a post or they send me a DM and they say something really rude. On a bad day, if I was to engage, I might say something that's more reactive and defensive. On a better day, if I was still getting sucked in, I might be like, okay, I'm going to try and like love on them and create a transformation here.
No, thank you. I ain't got time for that.
And so in those moments, I might try to have convinced them to see my perspective. I might become defensive. I might be like, well, I know that you're saying that I'm a fake and I'm materialistic or a sellout or whatever hateful comment they might say. And I might try to be like, well, actually, these are all the good things I'm doing and I wish that you could see it and blah, blah, blah. And you know what happens then? I close the message and my monkey mind starts stewing on it. And then I'm going about my day, I'm doing tasks, I'm working out, I'm doing my things that I need to get done. And it's right there, haunting me in the background, draining my precious energy.
Yeah.
And I could have avoided that by just blocking and deleting.
Yeah, and you can never win. So, for example, what I see with a lot of the clients that we work that are high profile and have a lot of haters, there's so much good that they're doing in the world that people have no idea about. Like they're literally giving thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to charities. They're running all kinds of events where they're supporting people behind the scenes. They're just giving to so many people in so many ways. And people have no idea what they're contributing to the world and the good that they're doing because they don't talk about it. They're not glorifying it. They're not doing it to get some kind of like clout from it. They're just doing it behind the scenes. And people will tear them to shreds for the way they dress or for what they're saying. And they just see them as this person in the world that is not contributing any good, but yet they are giving so much. And that hater behind the screen is not contributing anything positive, but hate.
So true.
And I see this over and over again. And people have to recognize when they're pointing the fingers at others and they're judging people and pulling people down and looking at their flaws, you need to understand that that's coming from your own shadow, which is unintegrated. And there's an opportunity to look at yourself because it's actually embarrassing. It's a really low vibrational way of being in the world. And it's not cool. Like, it's not successful. You don't see successful people getting online and just straight up hating on people. They're too busy in their zone doing what they do, like contributing and getting on with their creative pursuits. It's like, who has time to be a hater?
Yeah. It's definitely not contributing anything of value to the world
no.
or to other people. Okay, so I want to pivot the conversation a little bit to talk about the fear that we can have of taking up space and being successful and how that might change relationships. Because I remember for me, when we started to get some traction with our business and with social media and so on, coming from a pretty small place, right, New Zealand, which is essentially like an island, I remember feeling these waves of fear that people would be triggered by us being successful or
People
shiny.
were triggered.
And yeah, initially it started out as I was anticipating it and being like, what if as this starts to grow, people get triggered? And then people would be like, no, don't be silly. That's not going to happen. But then to be honest, it did happen.
Of course. So that's the key. It's knowing that judgment is going to come.
Mm-hmm.
People will judge you and they will project their own fears and limitations onto you.
Mm-hmm.
That is coming. That is a prerequisite for taking up space, for using your voice, for being authentic, and just doing what you came here to do. Because you're not here to please everyone and you're not for everyone. When you start taking up space, you do become polarizing because you stand for something, and not everyone's going to agree with what you stand for, and they are going to have their own opinions about that, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important that you stay connected to your heart and you stay connected to your truth, and you don't waver in your conviction of what you're here to do, because regardless of other people's judgments, you came here for a reason and you have your own unique gifts to share with the world. And other people's judgments are really irrelevant to you because that says more about them than it does about you. So I think that's just a major key to recognize when you start putting yourself out there. The
I
judgment's
agree.
going to come.
Yeah, I am grateful for conversations like this, and I wish I had had other people to say these kinds of things to me back then, because I think playing it down or pretending like it doesn't happen isn't helpful. And there is a way to compassionately validate the experience of stepping outside of the box or breaking through glass ceilings, where you realize you're not alone and that this is kind of a rite of passage that people have to go through. When you are thinking differently and innovating and playing bigger in life, you become a mirror for other people. And sometimes the reflection that you create through shining and living boldly makes other people feel very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And personally triggered and insecure and therefore defensive about their own personal choices. And they may not even realize that the way that they're starting to treat you or even think about you and the energy that they're emitting around you or the way that they're talking about you behind your back is coming from feeling threatened.
Correct. Yeah.
And feeling their own shame and the need to be like defensive or above you or gossip about you to maintain some sense of righteousness and power, rather than vulnerably acknowledging that there's things about the way that you're being that point to things about them that they're not yet ready to look at.
Yeah. Not everyone can go where you're going. That's another important thing to know. When we first started our journey with our business and we started to gain traction and get some success, I remember there were certain people in my life that would start to compare themselves to me and go into a state of competition. And when I was around them, I would feel that. Like we couldn't just be in space together.
Which could be called envy.
Yeah, there was jealousy, there was envy, and it didn't feel like it was coming from the heart. It felt like it was shadow qualities that they hadn't worked on yet and they maybe weren't ready to work on. And I was pointing at something that was triggering for them. And yeah, I remember that. And it was uncomfortable. And I had to distance myself from those people. And that's a part of the journey. Not everyone can go where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes family members.
There's something that I want to add here, which is when you trigger other people, and it brings up envy or jealousy, or they become insecure, or they may even distance themselves from you or start acting kind of strange, and the relationship changes and you're like, what happened? Like things were so good and now it's turned kind of weird. There is an opportunity to be compassionate and to recognize that instead of making them wrong or shaming or blaming them for not being there to meet you in your come up or whatever, that you could just see they're not feeling very good about themselves, and that behavior or energy is a reflection of that. And maybe
Yeah.
instead you could pray for them and just wish them
Yeah.
well, like genuinely hope for them that they can find their way and feel good about themselves, because it sucks to suffer.
It can be hurtful though, especially when it's coming from family members. We know what this is like. I've had to literally block certain family members out of my life because they were straight haters.
Mm-hmm.
And all they were doing is tearing me down, judging me, and bringing negativity into my life. That's not easy to do. That's
No.
hurtful. And you hope and you wish that people that you care about can come along for the ride and they can celebrate you as you take up space and you go out in the world and do what you want to do and you find success in that. But the truth is, not everyone's going to be cheering you on. Some people will be tearing you down and judging you, even the people closest to you. And that's sad, but that's the reality of this journey.
So let's have some fun here and talk about some of the things that we get hated on for, because I find this kind of funny. It's good to make light of it as well. Side note here, like if you can't laugh about it, then it's just going to weigh you down. So a few of the things that I find that really trigger people and that tend to attract the most projections, one is being confident. Like when you feel confident and when you take up space and you express yourself and you like yourself, people get bothered by that. Like, who do you think you are?
And you're feeling yourself.
Yeah, when you're feeling yourself, when you're full of yourself, when you're taking up space and being like, I like me,
Yeah, they start
that
to
can
look for
really
your
rub
flares.
people the wrong way.
People will look for your flaws straight away and then they'll use that to bring you down to make themselves feel better.
Mm-hmm. So that's one.
Mm.
Another one is money.
This is huge. This is so polarizing. I know for me, when I talk about creating generational wealth online, which is something that I haven't done yet, but I'm passionate about, I'm really, really passionate about it. And we're definitely on that path. People hate majorly.
Mm-hmm.
They think it's selfish. They don't realize the more money you have, the more people you can help, the more people you can employ, the more people you can support, the more things you can invest in, including your own business and contributing to the world. You can play a bigger game.
Mm-hmm. I think so much of what we're talking about here is also a reminder that it's all about how you frame things. The way that you see something determines what you make it mean, and then how you treat yourself and you treat others. And these projections arise from quite disempowering stories that people have. So, for example, the old belief that money is the root of all evil, or that people who are wealthy are selfish, that's one perspective or frame. But another one, which to me is actually a lot more true, is that if there weren't people who were hustling and generating wealth, there wouldn't be jobs for people who work for those companies. There wouldn't be so many innovations in society. And also, there's so much creativity that requires resources to generate on our planet. So I think choosing to work hard and chase dreams and create something that people enjoy purchasing is a sign that you're creating an impact and you're making changes in the world. So I just find it interesting when people frame it that way.
Yeah, and that takes a lot of work. It takes so much time and investment in yourself and your own belief if you're an entrepreneur out there in the world running your own business that's service-based. Like, that's not easy. It's so easy to sit on the sidelines and just judge.
And another thing that has come up along the way for us is when you start generating financial success, people who live in a state of lack are the first to put their hand out and be like, yeah, I know I was judging you and talking about you behind your back, but now that you're successful, can I have some?
Mm.
And that is the opposite of inspiring or generating a life of abundance. Those are people who set themselves up for that self-fulfilling prophecy of resentment and lack and poor relationships.
Mm.
When you are in a space of security and love and generosity and genuinely being happy for people, people feel that and it creates safety in relationships. And usually, like, a lot of good karma tends to come from that, right? Like, what we give out tends to come back. And when we put out
100%.
bad juju, people are like, why the F would I help you?
Yeah.
Like, go away.
Yeah, it's so true. Another area I see that we get hated on quite a lot with Awaken Breathwork is by people who are very religious and see breath work as a negative thing, and they're not into any form of spirituality and connection to guides and to loved ones that have passed over, and they believe that it's coming from a negative place. They believe that it's not in alignment with God. And my truth is, I felt the closest to God through Awaken Breath work, through my journeys, which is all about activating the heart and being in deeper connection with our higher self, with our guides and our loved ones, and ultimately God. That's where I feel the most connected and inspired and tapped into that greater energy of love that I can feel through every cell in my body. And it's so
Yes.
interesting that these people who say they're all about God preach hate.
Mm. I mean, I think this goes for not only religion, but any form of ideology or strong belief system that can then lead into becoming dogmatic.
Mm.
For example, what you said about breath work. You and I obviously love breath work. We've seen the benefits of it. We believe in it deeply. And yet we're not dogmatic about going around and trying to force it on people.
No, and it's not about a belief system either. It's a direct experience. So it's not about what you believe in. It's about having your own experience with it.
Right, and being open-minded. But what I guess I'm trying to say is you can be practicing something and recognize that it works for you without projecting that everyone else needs to get on board with what you're doing.
Mm.
And I see this with diet choices. I see it with certain practices that people have in their wellness routines. I see it in religion, spirituality, and so many other areas of life, relationship choices. Some people believe in monogamy, some people believe in non monogamy.
Mm.
There's so many different ways that belief systems can lead into becoming dogmatic and controlling, which leads to polarization
Which
and
leads to separation,
separation.
yeah, which is a big one, which we know, like, as we've spoken about in our podcast, it's the ego's job to create separation. So when you see people out in the world who are creating separation, then they're coming from the ego, they're not coming from the heart. And that includes religious people who hate on other people for not having the same beliefs as them. You
I
know,
mean, even with global situations, right? Look at the comments that people will have on social media around certain things that are happening with politics or with
oh my
certain
gosh, politics is
situations
so
with
divisive.
countries and the divisive, violent, vile energy that's happening among human
Yeah, it's
beings
like a virus.
debating.
It's a mind virus that comes through each individual, and it's not coming from the heart. It's coming from somewhere very different than the heart. And
And
it's
it's missing the
so
point.
negative and toxic and divisive and creates so much separation in this world. And we can see it everywhere.
So, this is, I think, where we have to zoom out and rise above
Yeah.
the hate, the negativity, and the polarization and separation of the unconscious ego and recognize that if we seek love and understanding, then we need to dig deep
Mm.
and practice that within ourselves and get out of that reactive mode
Yeah.
because we all have those moments of getting sucked into it and it's not healthy.
Mm-mm.
And I think we all know that, for example, when we're holding on to resentments, it is poison, first and foremost, more than anything, to ourselves.
Mm. So I want to hear a personal story because I know being in a relationship with you, and I know your gifts and what you're capable of and how many people you've supported with your gifts, specifically now talking about your intuitive abilities and channeling. I see how it ripples into many people's lives and literally changes their life.
Mm.
But I also know it's something that you struggle with because it is misunderstood and it does come with a lot of judgments from many people. So, talk to me about that. Talk to me about your journey with your voice, with your expression, and your intuitive abilities.
Yeah, this has definitely been the most challenging initiation for me when it comes to living authentically. What I've noticed is that I am my own worst critic, and many of us tend to be our own worst critics. So we don't even need a troll or a hater to point out our flaws and what we're doing potentially wrong, or how we might sound silly or crazy or whatever.
Or cringy.
We're already doing that to ourselves.
Yeah, we're already judging ourselves.
And that has been the case for me. Like, I didn't need someone else to be like, you're absolutely crazy, because I was already worried that I was going to seem that way. And I was already censoring myself and in my own internal war about whether or not I should even share these things, because this isn't something I chose. This isn't something that I personally one day woke up and was like, I'm going to learn how to channel. I'm going to learn how to do these things. This is something that happened so unexpectedly for me. And when the awakening and the opening up of my intuitive abilities happened, I felt so weird because there was no one around me talking about it or doing it. I know you loved it.
I loved it. It was my favorite thing.
And I immediately went into this primal reaction and was like,
fair.
people are going to think I'm crazy, or worse, they're going to think that I'm making it up, and that I'm like manufacturing and doing this to get attention, which to me was like the most cringy, awful thought. I'm like, I would be mortified if people thought that.
Yeah, I know another thing that you struggled with is feeling like you wouldn't be credible.
Yeah.
Which is a big one, right? Because one of the things we do, multiple times a week is we sit down with our cacaos, we do our breathwork practice, you channel, you bring through information that might be relevant to our relationship, to our life, to our business, to our direction. And we tap into that higher guidance, then we take action on it. That's something that we've been doing for many, many years now. And to me, that's one of my favorite things. Like, I love it so much, but I do see you struggle with that. Now, you're out on podcasts, you have channelings out there. We haven't channeled on this podcast yet. That could be coming soon. But, people can find your channelings online. But I know within you, it's still something that you feel like is an edge. It still feels like
It's vulnerable.
it's vulnerable for you.
Because it feels like I'm exposing myself. It feels naked.
Yeah.
And I know that with many people that I've worked with, we can feel like we're coming out of the closet with a part of ourselves that is weird, that's potentially going to be rejected. There's stigma around it. Not everyone is open and loving. And some people's judgments are actually really heavy.
Yeah.
To the point where I've had to face people not wanting to talk to me, know me, or be affiliated with me. People saying they think that I'm possessed, that I am channeling like dark entities, or that I'm worse, like I said, making it up, or all kinds of things. People saying that they're praying for me, or that they're laughing at me, and that they think it's
I love that
they
one.
think
I'm
it's
praying for
comical.
you. Yeah.
I'm praying for you. There are a lot of these comments that are online, and I've had messages like this. You have had it too.
I have it all the time. It makes me laugh.
There are videos on YouTube and there are forums on the internet about how you're doing like satanic rituals and all of this stuff.
or like
wild. And
how we're
FYI,
like
we're not,
how we're
fam.
like a part of the Illuminati or something like that. It's like,
Right.
come
The
on.
messages that we've had, literally like, you guys sold your souls.
Yeah.
You're a part of the Illuminati, all of this other stuff. And it's like, it takes courage and a thick skin to just let that wash off you.
Yeah.
I mean, as a sensitive person, I mean, I am sensitive and so are you. To be real with you all, like there are days where I get upset about it and I'm like hurt and I get disheartened at the state of humanity. Like I might not believe it. I might be like, okay, I know that's not true. I know where I'm coming from. I know who I am and what I'm here to do. But at the same time, I can be like, damn, are people really that low vibe and like trying to tear me down?
Yeah.
That's kind of heartbreaking. And you do have to develop a thick skin. And honestly, after I process the initial upset, as I know you do too, you end up grateful. Like if you choose to approach it with a growth mindset, you end up like, okay, dust it off. Like, yeah, that bothered me. You got me a little bit, little hater over there, but like I'm over it and now I'm stronger. So like try me now.
Yeah. Okay. So to everyone tuning in, can we please have some support out there for Hala and her channeling? And if you want to see that on this podcast, comment below. And if we get 100 comments or more saying that we want to see Hala channeling, then that's something that Hala can feel into for herself. And if she wants to bring it, then maybe you might see an episode where Hala channels live.
Okay, so there is a little nugget that I want to share on this note, which is, you know, the old saying that people will share, like, in order to be loved, you have to love yourself first. Self-love is so important, but having safe people around you is also really important. And I want to thank you because you have supported me and seen me and been a stand for me in so many moments where I have been like, I can't do this. I can't face the hate. The thought sometimes of what it will be like to just put myself out there and share feels daunting and heavy when I focus on the hate. But
me, it
when you
feels
have
fun.
people, exactly. So when you have people in your life that believe in you and remind you of your gifts and your purity and your lovability, it reminds you that there is good out there and there's brightness and love. And I think like, thank you all for the comments in advance, the love and the encouragement and the reminder that every single one of us has our people. And if you focus on trying to be a dimmed down vanilla version of yourself and appease to the haters and the naysayers, you're missing out on recognizing the people that are your people, that are here for you, that like really vibe with you. And it's the same with you. Like you're not everyone's cup of tea, but I look at the impact that you have in people's lives by being fully unapologetically you. And it's beautiful. And like I get to witness people tearing up and saying how you've changed their lives and you've got them through some of the darkest times.
Same with
And the
you.
only reason that's possible is because you had the courage to go first and be like, you know what? Not everyone gets me and I am weird, but I'm going to just be me and I'm going to trust that God put me here for a reason and I'm unique and my medicine is needed in this world. Like I
go.
am a part of the beautiful recipe of creation. And if I try to be something else, then
It's not
I'm
authentic.
not exactly. It's not authentic. It's not what God brought me here for.
Exactly. So as we come to the completion of this podcast, I want to remind everyone tuning in that as you step in to take up space and be authentic and share your truth and gifts in the world, you become a permission slip for others to do the same. So when you move through your own judgment, your own fears and self-doubt, and you don't let other people's judgments, projections, and limitations to slow you down and stop you, then you are playing the game, and life, the universe, God will always reward your heart-driven efforts. So just go for it. Just take up space. Just practice it. Just try it on. Just let it in. It might feel uncomfortable at first. It probably will. It's a practice. Keep going. And the more you do, the easier it gets. And then before you know it, you feel liberated and free within yourself, and you do not give a about the haters and what they have to say.
You're not alone. We're on this journey together. And shout out to all of you for being brave enough to bring your truth into the world. It's needed, and you've got this. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in the next episode.